guys, my name's Carolyn and welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I would do a discussion video on one of the best books that I've read this year, and possibly, no, I would say the best book that I've ever read, and that is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I first heard about this book on Helene Jefferson's channel back at the beginning of July when she read it, and it sounded really good. She loved it, and I thought, I love those type of books that make you think and feel, and so I decided to pick it up. So the first port of call was NetGalley to see if I could get a review copy, because to buy this book on Kindle and as a hardback was quite expensive, especially as it's a relatively new author and also very new to me, and I didn't want to invest that sort of money in someone that I might not like the style of. So I was very pleased to see it was on NetGalley, and so I requested it and I was approved. So I read this book as an e-arc, but once I'd finished it I just could not have it in a physical form, because one, it's a beautiful book, but this book means so much to me now that I have to have it. I like opening it up and seeing the words on the page rather than on my Kindle app, so I didn't particularly like reading it that way, but anyway, because I love this book so much, I really wanted to discuss it. And there are so many book reviews out there that if you want a completely spoiler-free overview of the book, then there are lots of wonderful reviews on YouTube to choose from. I didn't feel that I could review this book without giving away spoilers, and I wanted to go into some of the points that people have brought up that I've seen throughout Twitter and on YouTube that I sort of have a different opinion to them. So I thought I would do a discussion video instead, and I will say from the get-go that this video will probably contain spoilers because there are points in the book that I will make reference to. So if you don't want to know anything about the ins and outs of the book, I would say go and read it first and then come back to this video. I'd be really happy for you to come back and discuss it in the future. I know that I am not going to be as eloquent and as articulate as some of the other YouTubers out there that have reviewed this book, but I love this book so much and I'm very passionate about it that I really wanted to talk about it, and so I'm going to try. I hope that I can get my points across as well as I can, but without further ado, let's get started. So my view of the overall book and what it's about feels as though it's a little bit different from some other people's perspective, because I don't see this story as about four guys. I see it being about one guy, and that's Jude. The reason I say that the book is about Jude is because everything that happens within this book is in relation to Jude. So even though we do get passages of the book from the perspective of those other men, most of the time it is regarding Jude. It is how they feel about Jude, how Jude makes them feel, how he fits within their lives. You don't really get to know the other guys as much as you do Jude. You don't go back in time and hear about all of their pasts. You just really see them in relation to Jude. And so for me, this book is solely about Jude, his life, and those people around him. A Little Life is a very emotional book. It brought out lots of emotions in me. I found it beautiful, devastating. It deals with so many aspects of life that most of us don't even touch upon, such as physical, mental, sexual abuse, of self-harming, of grief, and a lot of those, even though we may not have been touched by them personally, we can empathise with, we can feel compassion, and although there were certain aspects of Jude's life that I could identify with, Yanagihara does not hold back at all. She lays out everything for you to see and feel. There are certain points that I've noticed people bring up, and I'm going to just talk about those points as best I can, and what I think about those points and why I may disagree with them. And the first one is the timelessness of A Little Life. It's a 720 page book, and I may have missed it, but I don't think there was any date in this book to anchor it to any point in time. And people have said that they found this very frustrating. And at first I could understand that. For the first 200 pages, my thoughts kept saying, so where are we in history? Is it present day? Is it in the 40s? Is it in the 70s? And I felt that frustration. But the further I read into the book, I realised that this was very specific. I think Yanagihara wanted to keep the book solely about Jude and the people around him. And I think as soon as you put a date on something, you place it in history. And I think that whether you consciously think about that or not, as you read a book, if it's based in the 1940s, you know that the war is going on, the Second World War. And so there are certain aspects of people that you'd say to yourself, well, would they do that with the Second World War going on? Or did they really wear those sort of clothes? And all these little things. And I think that Yanagihara wanted to be totally focused on Jude and his circle of friends and his life and his past. And I think that overall I felt quite liberated that I didn't have that anchor in time, because otherwise I would have injections coming from all directions of that period in history, or even in present day you would be bombarded with little things like that, and it would take you out of the story. And so it being timeless, I felt quite liberated in that. I didn't have to worry about the outside world. All I had to worry about was Jude and Willem, Malcolm, JB and Harold, and that's basically it. So to me, the timelessness, it didn't bother me. I actually liked it and felt liberated by it. The other point I heard going around Twitter and YouTube is the point of sexuality, and that some people were very frustrated that Yanagihara didn't label certain characters with a certain sexuality, and I think probably they may be focusing on Willem. Of course, Willem is an actor, and you hear about his exploits with many women, and then he falls in love with Jude. And so a lot of people felt that they needed that bisexuality label planted directly on his head. And although I can understand that, because we are surrounded by labels, we need labels. In life we need labels, because otherwise we'd have to describe everything in such detail to get across what we mean. But the more I read on in the book, the more I realised that when it's concerning emotion, when it's concerning feeling and love, I don't think we need those labels. I didn't, in the end, I wasn't saying, well, is he gay? Is he not gay? Is he bisexual? Is he this? Is he that? In the end, it did not matter. What does it matter? Why should anybody care whether he was having sex with women and then he fell in love with Jude? Why should we need to label him? I think that one day, maybe we'll have a time when we won't label people, that we will just accept that they're going out or loving or falling in love with or marrying a person that they love. There was a point in the story that resonated with me, and Willem was talking to his agent, and his agent said, "You're in love with a guy, that means you're gay." And I'm not quoting exactly, but his overall point was, I'm not in love with the guy, I'm in love with Jude. And that is exactly it. He didn't label himself. He wasn't going to come out as gay, he wasn't going to come out as bisexual, he wasn't coming out as anything. He was just saying, I'm in love with Jude. And I thought that was really special and beautiful, and made me realise that labels in this particular instance with love mean nothing. Let people love who they want to love. The other point that I've seen floating around is people felt that what happened to one person, so Jude, was unbelievable. It wasn't realistic, that nobody would go through as much as he did. And to be honest, I felt that this was quite offensive in the fact that there are people that go through this much pain by people they've trusted or cared about or loved. For me, I didn't see what happened to Jude as unbelievable. I saw it as something that could and does happen. Jude's core belief was that he was worthless, that he wasn't a person that could be loved. And that core belief was so instilled in him that even when he grew older, he still believed it. And I think when somebody has this unwavering belief that they are worthless and they are not deserving of love, I think it can ooze from every pore. And because of that, I think the predators that live in our world hone in on these people and they view them as victims. They view them as people that aren't going to fight back. And because these people are vulnerable, the predators notice them. They are waiting for these kind of people to come into their view. Children are vulnerable, and so was Jude. And I feel that Jude did not have anybody to help him fight these people. And I think that the more and more that happened to him, it just cemented those core beliefs that he was worthless and did not deserve love. And when you're a kid and you start out life where you were abandoned by your own parents, you were brought up by people that beat you and abused you. And then you found one person, Brother Luke, who you felt loved you, but then just used you again. I think it's a perpetual cycle, and Jude had nobody to help him. As he moves through his childhood into his teenage years, those core beliefs are there, and people keep betraying him. The predators keep finding him. And for me, I just see that as all too true. And personally, I didn't see it as unbelievable. I think Yanagihara wrote it in such a beautiful way that I don't think at any point did I think this is totally unbelievable. It just resonated with me, and it just broke my heart. The one thing I will say about Jude is that he frustrated me. And I could feel the fear and frustration from Willem and Harold as well. And I felt that because I wanted Jude to get help. I wanted him so much to go to a therapist and really work through it all, to talk about it, to get feedback and to learn that he is worth loving, he is worthwhile, he is meaningful. And because he doesn't do that, because he doesn't want to talk about it, and there's nothing anybody can do but sit back and just watch him go through so much pain, even into his adult years. And for him to have to deal with this and feel that he's alone in it, and the only way he can get relief is by self-harming, is just, you just want to shake him and say, these people love you so much. You can tell them anything and they won't walk away. But of course, we are privileged as readers because we get to see inside everybody's head. We get to see inside Jude's head, so we know where he's coming from. And we get to see inside Willem's head and Harold's head, so we know where they're coming from. And because we are in that privileged position, we can say to Jude, open up, they'll love you no matter what. But of course, Jude doesn't know what's going on inside their heads. He can only guess. And because his core belief is that he's worthless, and that he thinks as soon as they know about how disgusting and dirty he is, and all the things he's done, which we know is not his fault, but he believes that they are, he does not trust that they're not going to walk away. He's just waiting for that one moment that he says something or someone finds out something and they will be gone forever, because he has been constantly betrayed by those he's trusted and loved. And how do you get over that? I don't know. I've heard other people say that they felt that this collection of men were almost portrayed as saintly, and I must disagree with that, because I think that all of these characters were immensely flawed, but we love them anyway, and that's okay because people are flawed, but fundamentally they were beautiful people, and not one of them really meant harm, even though they did harm others. So Jude was a beautiful person, but he would never open up to his friends, and so he hurt them. They felt betrayed by him. They couldn't understand why he didn't trust them. And as the years went by, I think that they became more and more resentful of that. And I think you could see that especially in JB. He couldn't get past the fact that Jude was very private. He wanted to know everything about Jude. And because Jude wouldn't open up to him, he got very frustrated and annoyed at that. JB, who's going through his own problems, he's going through his own demons, and the fact that he becomes reliant on drugs, and in one way, and I thought that Yanagihara did this very well, and I imagine that drug users go through this quite a lot, is that they have this conflict within themselves, that on one hand they desperately want to get out of the situation they're in, but also on the other hand they feel secure in it and they understand it and they know it. And so asking for help, which I know JB does in the end, and luckily he manages to move on, but when he was in the state of being in that confusion and the fear of it all, he became really mean and said some very mean things to Jude. And so when he was in that state of being addicted to drugs and being a bit messed up, his whole feeling about Jude came out in that way, in that nasty way, because that he loved Jude so much. He wanted to know everything about him. I thought it was very poignant to have Harold and Julia adopt Jude. I thought that that was really lovely and showed that even in our adulthood that there are some things that we still want in life, to be loved and part of a family that love you unconditionally. And I think that that's what Jude got in the end. I think he did get that love, unconditional love, that no matter what he said or what he did, they understood that fundamentally he was a beautiful person. And I think that that did give him some stability, but because of this core belief in him that was so negative, he didn't want to believe in it, and so I don't think he managed to gain as much from it if he'd have really let go of those core beliefs. The other point that others were mentioning was the fact that there weren't any women in the story that were prominent enough. There was Julia, of course, who was Harold's wife, she was sort of on the periphery, and a couple of other female friends dotted here and there, but predominantly it is an all-male cast of characters. And to be honest, I put my trust to a certain extent in the author, and I feel that by mentioning that a person wasn't in a story, I think it's almost pressuring authors to put certain people in their stories to appease other people. I think that to make an author feel bad that they haven't got any women in their story, that she's making a statement of some kind. I don't know. We don't know what goes on in an author's mind as they're writing their book, And maybe Yanagihara did have women with more prominent roles, but as she was writing found out that it didn't work for the story. The fact is that most men don't discuss things, and maybe that was one of the main faults within that group, because they were all men and they didn't discuss stuff as much as women do. Maybe that was something that she wanted, because if you put women in there, maybe the women would have been able to talk in more depth to Jude and help him understand. And I think for an author just to keep in a particular person because of a particular trait, or because of their sexuality, race, it doesn't feel authentic to me. And maybe it's naive of me, but maybe it's not because of some underlying sort of thought process or whatever. You know, if you have an all-white cast of characters and not one black person, maybe there was a reason for that. And for us to put pressure on that author and almost give that author a feeling that maybe they're racist or something, I think is a little unfair. I'm not saying this for every author, but for me, with this particular book, with this particular author, I didn't feel anything was going on with that. I felt as though this was her story that she wanted to tell, and that was it. Another point I wanted to make quickly, as I know this video is getting long, I've heard that a lot of people were very unhappy about Willem dying. I can remember reading the chapter leading up to it, and I could feel that something was going to happen. I could feel there was some energy within that chapter that was making me very nervous, very uncomfortable. And I got to the end of the chapter and I had to put the book down because I knew what was coming, and I had to do that quite a lot throughout the book, to be honest. Put it down because I knew what was coming, or I didn't like what was happening, and I just had to remove myself from the situation because I felt as though I was right there. I can understand that maybe people saw it as a plot device for the ending of Jude and how he commits suicide based on that, but I didn't really personally see it as a plot device, because I believe that Yanagihara always knew Jude was going to commit suicide and that was going to be the end of the book. I don't think that Yanagihara held back at all within the book. I don't think she needed a plot device like Willem dying in the crash to enable her to then suddenly have Jude commit suicide. I think that even without the crash, she would have led up to Jude committing suicide, and because of everything else that went on before, it would have been completely understandable in our eyes as readers. And so although it was incredibly sad what happened to Willem, it was just another aspect of life. So there you have it. That's my discussion and my thoughts on A Little Life. I adored this book. I love this book. I thought it was beautifully written. I thought that Yanagihara did a sensational job at bringing these characters to life and making them so well-rounded and real. I felt as though I was right there among them in their lives, and I think that's why it made it so powerful, so emotive, and I won't ever forget it. And although the book is a difficult read, I know that at some point I will reread it, because I'm sure in those 720 pages that I've missed a lot of stuff, and I just feel that by rereading it I will be able to gain even more from it. I think this was obviously a book that was written with love, with knowledge, with compassion, with understanding. She must have researched this very well, and I take my hat off to her to be able to sit and write something so poignant and so devastating, to give us a book that was just beautiful. And I know I've said that so many times, but I just say thank you. If you do want to discuss this book in the comments, please be nice to people, please be friendly. We can all have opinions. Opinions are fantastic. That's what's so wonderful about things in life, where you want to discuss movies, books, whatever. I know that I love this book and you may not have, and that is absolutely okay. And I relish the thought of us discussing it and why I loved it and why you didn't. But I just want to keep the comments really friendly and really nice and clean, so please don't beat up on anybody because it's just unfair. We all have a right to have an opinion. So that's it, that's at the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Oh my god, it's really hard to discuss something. I haven't done this in a really long time, discuss something in so much depth. So, and it is harder than it looks when you're doing a video of this kind, so yeah, I hope I did okay. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Thanks a lot guys, bye!